If you know what you're doing with a rasp and sandpaper, you can knock out an arm carve in about 25 minutes. But if you want to do it literally 100 times faster, get the same results every time, and save your eyesight, making a reusable jig is a great idea. Episode 5 in this Luthier's Workshop build series. In the last episode I made a glue caddy to keep all of your adhesives organised. In this episode I'm putting together the jig you see here so you can cut arm carves on your guitar bodies in only 30 seconds. Down below in the description I'm including free blueprints for this build as well as AI, DXF, 3DM, DWG and SVG files for your CNC setup. On screen is a render of an earlier incarnation of the jig showing its features. Basically, you put your body in the front, adjust your angle, and slide the front of the jig against your bandsaw fence. You may want to use clamps to hold your body on, but I made a separate insert for each body type I do, so I can batch process my bodies quickly and have them turn out the same every time. First job is to measure and cut my panels for the CNC. I cut them oversized to give me some alignment wiggle room. You don't need a CNC machine to make this jig though, so if you want to follow the blueprints and use a jigsaw and a router, you'll get the same thing. I have my panels cut out and I'm loading them into my X-Carve from Inventables. I'll be upgrading this machine in the next month or two to a lead screw system, as well as adding some much heavier duty aftermarket parts. So if you're into small scale CNC setups, make sure you subscribe to see that stuff. It's important to note when using sheet stock that thicknesses will always vary, so I'm using magnifier glasses and a vernier caliper to get the cut depth right. Now we're cutting out the shapes. This will take a few hours, so I'm going to go work on some other things. This CNC is slow, but sometimes I'll use it instead of just cranking it out by hand, because I can do other work while it's cutting. Once all the parts are out of the machine, I simply chisel the tabs that are holding them to the panel and cut the outside tabs off with the bandsaw. Before you copy my jig exactly, make one out of cardboard and tape and make sure it will fit in your bandsaw. Your bandsaw may have all manner of protuberances that mine doesn't and vice versa, so do a disposable test run before committing it to wood. Because we want a nice looking jig that won't give us splinters, I give all the parts a sand with 120 grit on a sanding block. This is the outline of my Teleblaster style guitars. I'm after a press fit into the part that holds the body so I don't have to use clamps. I put it into the form and it's a very nice fit. It holds the shape well without putting a damaging amount of pressure against it. Because I'm going to glue two of these forms together to hold the body, I'm using the outline here to align them. As usual, I lay a trail of wood glue, spread it out evenly, and then I can put the top form onto the bottom one. I hold them together with a clamp at each corner, pop out the outline, then cover it in clamps. I'm going to give that 45 minutes to dry, so I'll use that time to clean up some of the parts and make any adjustments I need. I'm using a brass piano hinge for this because that's what I had laying around. Now I have my backing board, the jig base, hinge, adjustment arms, that thing, and one of those. To glue the form onto the backing board, I'm going to trace the form so I know where not to spread glue. Like I've said, I'm using forms for my bodies, but you don't have to. Clamps are fine. If you want to use different forms for different bodies, skip this step and attach them using nuts and bolts, so you can switch forms whenever you like. So that's the bit that holds your body while you're cutting it. Now let's assemble the rest. I'm using the hinge as a template and hole punching the screw positions, then driving the screws. It's important to fit your hinge as parallel to the fence runner as possible, otherwise you're going to get a wonky cut. I'm gluing one of the adjustment arms to the base here. In the blueprints and files, you can tell which one it is because it's got a little foot. Because this is the prototype, I made the foot separately in the video, so I have to add it later. For now, I'm holding up this arm using just 2 squares. In a later video, I'll share some downloadable files for some angle clamps you can make from plywood. They'll help with things like this and also cabinet making. This is the little foot I was talking about. I just wanted to give the bracket a little more real estate to glue to the base. I found the jig is definitely strong enough without screws. For this next bit, I'm going to glue a block to each side of the bracket for the same reason. I didn't include them in the plans because you can literally just use offcuts from this project and cut them however big or small you prefer. I've had a box of these aluminium washers kicking around forever and I'm always looking for projects to use them in. The extrusion on the bottom holds the bolt within the slot on the adjustment arm. Again, you can use anything you like to stick the brackets together. Wing nuts and bolts, fancy knobs and recessed T-nuts, or just a clamp. Because these little pieces like to slip around laterally under clamping pressure, I'm adding a few grains of salt to work as a soluble clamp. Again, just use offcuts for these, their size is up to you. Now I get to screw on the backing board and form for the last time and glue the adjustment arm to the backing board, completing the jig. Again, no screws are being used, the glue is enough. This jig was the proof of concept, so I had no idea when I was making it if it would work or not. So instead of testing it on wood that costs money, I used some of my prototyping material. This foam board is $20 Australian and there's enough there to make 3 guitar bodies and a bunch of necks. I use it when prototyping new ideas in the CNC machine, so if it doesn't work out, it literally only costs me about $6. Also, if I have a bunch of offcuts of it, I can glue them together to make new blanks, so I'm a really big fan of this stuff. The best thing about it is it cuts so easily, so it puts no load on your tools. The worst thing about it is it creates snow everywhere. I do all of my CNC milling in a soundproof, dust-extracted box, so for me, it's a bit of a non-issue. Okay, the test body fits perfectly into the jig, so now we can check out how it performs. The far right side of the jig runs against the fence, and it looks like I've sized this thing perfectly. If we zoom in, I'm going to take a bite out of the foam to test the straightness and quality of the cut. I'm happy with that, so I can go deeper. You can see the form itself is getting cut here. Don't worry, that's all part of the plan. Just so long as you miss the hinge, the rest is sacrificial. The last cut of the jig is made at the same time as your first arm carve. We already know how this worked out because I showed you at the beginning of the video. It really is as simple as sliding the jig along the fence. I'd like to thank you for joining me for this episode. In the next episode, I'll be making a jig for creating Fender-style headstock face transitions. You know, the little ramp between the logo and the fretboard. I hope to see you then.